Hi, everyone. Thanks for being with me. This is a rather important day, a significant day, I guess, in many ways, particularly if you're Kathleen Folbig. Now, Kathleen was sentenced to 40 years jail. She was sentenced for a 40-year period for the murder of her three children and one that was it was declared that there was manslaughter. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this case because there are some elements to this that are really important. And I just wanted to go through, just to remind those of you who may not know about Kathleen Folbig, just a little bit more about her history and what that specifically means. Now, Kathleen, she's born in 1967. She's an Australian woman who was convicted of murdering her three infant children, Patrick, Sarah, and Laura. She was also convicted of the manslaughter of her fourth child, Caleb Gibson, at age 19 days. The death took place between 1989 and 1999. Her husband contacted the police after discovering a personal diary in which she had written entries that implied she may have harmed the children. Folbig was sentenced to 40 years with a parole period of 25 years. She maintained her innocence, claiming the four children died from natural causes. Now, scientific and medical research suggesting the daughters may have died of natural causes were rejected by a judicial inquiry in 2019. Subsequent research published in 2020 led 90 Australian scientists and medical professionals in March 2021 to petition the New South Wales government to pardon Folbig, saying all the deaths could be explained with genetics. On the 5th of June 2023, Folbig was unconditionally pardoned by New South Wales Governor Beazley and was released from prison. How up to date is that Wikipedia? Because that's where I got that from. But what I want to talk about also is her earlier life, and this is quite significant, particularly if you're interested in issues around child protection. And clearly this is a child protection issue, whichever side of the fence you might sit on. You know, at first, I guess most people would have thought that this was a horrific act and that she got whatever it was that was dished out, 40-year sentence basically, brought down to 25, and that she deserved everything she got because the conclusion was that she had killed these children. Well, let us not always jump to those sorts of conclusions because we also need to understand a little bit about where her life was prior to all of this and what her experiences may have been and how they may have impacted the decisions that were eventually made. Now, I've given many YouTube conversations, many talks, in fact, about the fact that if a person comes from a care background, the chances are that they are viewed unfavourably as opposed to somebody who comes from a middle class or upper class background. Now, the reality here is that Kathleen came from a terrible background. I'll just read a little bit about her background. So on the 8th of January 1969, Kathleen Folbig's biological father, Thomas John Taffy Britton, murdered her mother, Kathleen May Donovan, by stabbing her 24 times. Kathleen was 18 months old. Her father was arrested the day after the murder and would go to serve 15 years in prison for murder before being deported to England. Folbig was made a ward of the state and placed into foster care with a couple. On 18th of July 1970, she was removed from their care and placed in the Bidura Children's Home. 2 months later, Folbig moved into a permanent foster care placement. This arrangement lasted until she was a young adult. She left school at the age of 15 and married Craig Gibson Folbig in 1987. So this is a story about a woman who had a foster care experience. And not only that, I don't know what she probably remembered when she was 18 months old in terms of her father killing her mother, but I can guarantee you that the trauma around all of that probably played itself out in her life. And I'm not making a judgment at all about how she coped with that, how she dealt with trauma that had been there, not about just being in foster care, but also about losing her parents, one through death by the hand of the father, and the father by being incarcerated. So we don't know how any of those issues have unfolded in relation to her. And I guess what the jury and what others may have done is drawn conclusions about who she was as a result of those experiences. Now, I want to play to you today the ABC News item with regard to this, because it puts the whole thing into perspective as to where this situation with regard to Kathleen Folbig stands today. Now, she was pardoned today, and the pardon means that she can be released from jail. It is not exoneration. She's seeking that, and the only way she can seek that is through the courts. So we're yet to see what transpires there. And compensation. Woman has had last 20 years of her life taken from her and been incarcerated for what we now believe to be a wrongful incarceration. So what does all of this mean then? To those of us who work in the field, I guess we need to be mindful of the fact that there are many, many occasions where people are judged prematurely just based on where they come from and the circumstances that have brought them there. She was a guardianship kid, and some of those experiences, I'm sure, had a lasting impact on her. That doesn't mean that she's a bad person. Neither does it mean that she actually willingly killed these children. What it does mean is that we need to be more mindful of some of the decisions that are made based on stuff which is not about scientific evidence. And that brings me to the final point I'll make before I play the ABC video, is that science does play a part, a significant part, often in deciding what are facts and what are not facts. And I hope my sovereign citizen friends are listening to this, because you need to note that scientific proof, evidence, often overcomes assumptions and perceptions. And so I'll play that video for you now, and we'll talk about it as it goes through.
ABC News, I'm Ros Childs. After 2 decades behind bars, Kathleen Folbig has been pardoned and is free from jail. 20 years ago, Ms Folbig was found guilty of killing her 4 children. Caleb, Patrick, Sarah and Laura died on separate occasions between 1989 and 1999, aged between 19 days and 19 months. Former Chief Justice Tom Bathurst has given the New South Wales government the preliminary findings of a second judicial inquiry. In the findings, Mr Bathurst said he'd reached a view that there is reasonable doubt as to the guilt of Ms Folbig. The inquiry heard new scientific evidence which raised those doubts.
So, considering Mr Bathurst's conclusion that he is firmly of the view that there is reasonable doubt as to Ms Folbig's guilt, I consider that his reasons establish exceptional circumstances of the kind that weigh heavily in favour of the grant of a free pardon. This morning at 9:30 I met with the Governor. I recommended that the Governor should exercise the royal prerogative of mercy and grant Ms Folbig an unconditional pardon. The Governor agreed. Ms Folbig has now been pardoned. So I would like to also say that we also took the opportunity, as you expect us to make sure that Ms Folbig was released without delays.
Well, Senior Court reporter Jamel Wells has been following this case for nearly 20 years and has unique insights into it.
The Attorney-General Michael Daly said today that Tom Bathurst, the retired judge who presided over this second judicial inquiry, met with him on the weekend and handed him a preliminary report into that inquiry, and he said there's no doubt in Mr Bathurst's mind that there is reasonable doubt about Kathleen Folbig's convictions. So Mr Daly said she has been pardoned. He said she has been released from jail already. Now, we know, Ros, that the case against her when she stood trial in 2003 was circumstantial, purely circumstantial. And Mr Daly said today that he was aware that more information had come forward in the medical world and the scientific world. That came out at the judicial inquiry, and he said the processes of the law have worked the way that they should. This has been taken into account, and he's satisfied with Mr Bathurst's finding of reasonable doubt. So he's exercised his power today to pardon her, and she's walked free from prison.
So can you give us some background to the case and how...
And I think and to me, that's the point. The point is that it was circumstantial at the beginning, but to the degree to which she was labelled and categorised based on her past experiences, we do not know and probably never will know. But we need to be wary of the fact where there's only circumstantial evidence and that the facts are unknown, and where science can step in and resolve some of those issues, then perhaps we need to wait until the science is ready before we jump to any radical conclusions. The issue that I do want to raise above all of this too is that there'll be a whole host of people who will jump on the bandwagon because they'll still determine that she's guilty of the murder of these children. The reality is that they had a genetic predisposition to a condition which affects their heart and which just causes their heart to cease functioning. So I want to warn those people. Well, I guess warn isn't the word. I want us to be wary of who those people are, and the fact that there'll be a lot of Twitter trolls and there'll be other people who will be suggesting that this woman is still guilty of these deaths, even though it's now proved that there's not enough evidence to even suggest that. In fact, the evidence is contrary to that. But there will be people who'll be nasty. There'll be people who'll still express their anger towards an individual simply because of where she comes from, not just about what she might have done. And those people, we need to be able to say to them, you know, we don't want to have anything to do with you. We want you to bugger off. We don't want you to spout accusations about things of which you do not know. The court has gone through the proceedings on a number of occasions in relation to this matter, and they've now come to an appropriate outcome. I think it's a good outcome. I wish her all the best. I don't know how a person gets on with their lives after going through what she's gone through, but I hope that she finds peace. Thanks, everybody, for being with me. Take care, look after yourselves, and be safe.